Thank you for joining Sonar 201 today. We got a time of 3:30, so let's go ahead and get started. My name's Donnie Gilbert. I've been in logistics for about 16 years. I grew up basically in the spot markets. I bid freight on a regular basis. That picked up for the most part the same day. If I was lucky, it picked up the next morning. I bid freight for both an asset company and for brokerages. So I've got a little bit of experience in both types of markets. Today, we're going to go through and we're going to look at some of the indices that we have in Sonar that I would have loved to have used. Um, we're going to look at indices such as Outbound Tender Volume Index, a brief view at inbound tender volumes. We'll look at the Headhaul Index, outbound tender rejection rates, which can be broken down into dry van and reefer for inbound and outbound. We'll look at some of the lane outbound tender rejection rates, and if we have a little bit of time, we'll get into tender lead times and wait times. These indices can be viewed on a US map, a chart, and a tree map will be the ones that we look at today. And so before we kind of get really started here, a few things I want to show you. Up here in the top right-hand corner, you'll see this little question mark surrounded by a circle. Click on this, and this will bring us to our Knowledge Center. Click on the Knowledge Center. And in our Knowledge Center, you'll see indices by category. I encourage everybody to go in and go through this indices by category. These are all the indices that we have listed in our Sonar, and they're broken down by agriculture. We have air indices, some company financial data, DAT truckload rates for long haul, average long haul, detention, energy prices, energy volumes, some financial market information, truck fleet counts, macro capacity insights, macroeconomic indicators, maritime, rail. Today we'll be looking at market volume insights, and we'll also, scrolling down here, we'll be looking at some of this trucking supply and demand. But there's a lot of good information, and when you click on these indices here, truckload tender volumes, I'd explain, what is this? Who is interested? What does this tell me? And it'll also give you very important the type of the indice codes that we use when we're looking up a chart. Here we have OTVI, and this is, of course, the market. You have OTVI dot, and you can either do USA for the national outbound tender volume chart, or you can type OTVI and a dot, and then, of course, the market code that we use. We use the airport codes. All the airport codes are correct except for Houston. We use HOU. There is an airport that is HOU, but of course we're all used to, I believe, IHH. But we're not reading on the data, guys. They were correct when they said that we had a HOU for Houston. But you'll type it in, TOTVI.MEM. That'd be if we're looking at the Memphis market. Scroll down here. We have it separated by equipment type, ROTVI, which would be reefer, and VOTVI, which would be van. So if you want to look at Memphis, it would be VOTVI.MEM. So read through these, and there are a bunch of them. It is a good place to start and some self-learning for you to take on in Sonar. Now, when we first open up Sonar, you'll actually be brought in, and you'll be on our national pages. And you cannot change these national pages. So what we do is you can only open up pages that are under my pages. So here I have several pages that I have already saved. But we're going to start with a new page today. And I encourage you to build different pages like I have and save them. The way that you save them is the last indice that you brought up, whether it be a chart or a map or a tree map, you just kind of leave it alone and swap pages or create a new page. And if you leave it on there, it'll hold that page and save it. So we're going to start out as if we have no current pages. And we go down here to the very bottom and click Edit Pages. When you click on Edit Pages, you'll see this little blue typing right here above. It says Add a Page. I will click there, and I will name it. I'm going to put Sonar 201, and we're going to start off with a map. So I'm going to save it as Sonar 201 map. And when I click enter there to add, you'll see that it'll pop up here under my pages, but it'll be blank. So we're going to need to add the map that we're going to start out with. Over here in the top right, you see this blue plus sign to the right of Hello Donnie. We'll click that, and we'll go down there to map. and I will click on our map icon. Once I click on maps, it'll bring me up basically a blank map. And what we want to do is click on this little guy right here. This is a truck because we're going to be looking at trucking indices. When I click on him, it opens up. I want to scroll down and turn on our chloropleth settings. I want to go down here below, and I want to turn our legend on. And then today, I will click on our chloropleth index, and we're going to start off with volumes. So I'm going to type in volume, and it'll bring up the different indices that include the word volume. And I'm going to scroll down to outbound. They're in alphabetical order, so M. And then these are some of our rail container information. I might have just blown past it here. Outbound tender volume index. This is the index that I want to start out with today. I click that little blue arrow right here. We'll move this section over. And the big arrow up here in the top left, this will move the map to 100% of our page here. Kind of scroll in here to see what's going on. And you will see a map of the U.S. These are all 135 markets. As you hover over the markets, it will give you the index that we are using. Now, how we created this index, on March 1st of 2018, we took the market at that day and we indexed it 10,000. We said all the markets together, all 135 markets, all the volume numbers added together is equal to 10,000. And then, of course, we let it go from there. And each day it's either gone up or gone down. And I believe today that we were at like 97.55. So once we took that, we took our outbound tender market share and, of course, multiplied it into our national average. And we got the size of each of the markets. So if we hover over the Ontario market, we see a tender volume index of 380 index points. If we hover over Houston over here, we have an index of 236 index points. And you see where we can see the big six markets here. We have Atlanta, which is 382. We have Harrisburg, PA, that is 308 index points. Chicago right over here is 188. And of course, some smaller markets. Memphis is shrank a little bit. It's down to 142. But you can also click on a market, and it'll bring up that market, all the indexes below here that are in that market. So that is also good info. But really, we're using the maps for really a high elevation. But if you want to, you can click on it, open up, see all the indices, or you can go to the indice that we're on. It always brings it up first, outbound tender volume. And I can also click right here on this, and it'll bring my chart up. But we'll get the charts here next. So looking at our outbound tender volumes, it's a good high elevation look at what is going on in the markets today, volume-wise. It lets us know where the freight is picking up. As you see here on our legend down below, the white markets are 0 to 76.69. That's a lot of your small and medium smaller markets. 76.09 to 153.15. These are the lighter shades of blue. And as they shade darker, the markets get higher in outbound market tenders, market freight. So that's how we can see kind of what's going on. You see what's going on in the bigger markets, Dallas and Fort Worth here. And of course, some here through the Northeast that are starting to pick up. Now, if we want to, we can also look at inbound. Type in volume here again. Still scroll up to inbound tender volume index and get this out of the way here. It looks a little bit different. And this just tells us where the freight is actually, where a lot of the freight is actually going. On this one, you'll see here, Florida's starting to light up a little bit blue. That's because Florida absorbs a lot of freight, a lot more freight inbound to Florida than outbound Florida. So here you see where a lot of freight goes into the Florida markets. Up here in New England, again, we see a lot of blue markets, and that's because New England is one of those market regions that absorbs a lot of freight, a lot more than actually comes out. And of course, Atlanta this year, we've seen a lot more freight going into Atlanta. It's really been a backhaul market for much of the year. It's got inbound tender volume index of 392, which is a lot higher than their outbound volumes. So looking here on the map, you see Denver and Salt Lake City. They're markets that are large markets that import freight into those markets. Both Denver and Salt Lake bring freight in and distribute those freight to the surrounding markets, which are a lot of rural markets here in Montana, of course, Western Colorado, and Wyoming was a state name that I could not remember there right quick. And of course, they'll come into like Salt Lake City or Denver. They'll be distributed out and moved up by smaller companies in these markets. So you'll see a lot of freight head into these markets. The Pacific Northwest is also another region that absorbs a lot of freight. So you'll see here, Northern California absorbs a lot of freight. So inbound tender volumes lets us know where freight is going. Now, when we get into this, I'm going to build a new page, and we're going to look at how we can use this information on a chart. Charts are really what I love because it lets us know the trends and the changes that are going on in a market. And that is very important because here, especially in the brokerage section, what has happened in the last 7 to 10 days can really affect what's going on with the freight rate. So I'm going to go down here to edit pages again. I'm going to click add a page. I'm going to put SONAR 201 chart. Chart training. I've used these before here, so I'll click on this and I'll click add. Again, I'm going to pop up here with a blank page, so I'll need to go to this blue plus sign here in the top right corner. I will click on that and I will go down to a chart. And when I click on a chart here, it will be blank because I need to add in one of my codes. So to start off, we'll put OTVI dot, and we'll just start off with USA. Enter here. And this gives us our first chart of what has been going on in tender volumes. You can kind of scroll out or scroll in. You can click 1 month, 3 month. We can click a 1 year view here, and it'll show us what all's gone into for a year. Now, I like to see this chart with a little bit of better visibility. So I'm going to actually click on display here, and I'm going to scroll down here to large fonts, and it's going to make the numbers and the letters in this chart just a little bit bigger. All right here. So when we bring out these, we can really kind of zoom in and see here what's been going on over a long period of time. Maybe if you're looking at a RFP, you need to know what kind of volumes are happening in a market over a extended period of time. Or we can really kind of zoom in and see what's been going on in the past week or two. So looking here at the end of the month here, we see for October, and this is on a national level. This is the national market rate. We can see where tender volumes climbed up, and they broke 10,000. Let me click on my little pointer here. And we can see where they broke 10,000 on 10/31. But since then, since the beginning of November, we've seen them trending down to 96.43. Looks like yesterday they're 97.55. My bad. So here we've lost a lot of volumes, about 1% each day. So far, if we really want to look at a display, we could go down here to seasonality. I just want to look at 1 year and click on show seasonality. We can compare this to 2018. I'm going to click full year here to expand it out. Let's see here. Oh, I've already clicked large fonts. Let me turn it back on here. So here we're looking at our large fonts, and we can see right here how it compares. We've had volumes that have been higher than 2018 this year, right up till today. And we see where our volumes in 2019 finally have dipped below our volumes that were 2018. So for the last 3 months or so through 2019, we've seen where our volumes have climbed up over the previous years, and we've been running fairly strong on volumes this year. Volumes, not freight rates. And this is just a good way to see what's going on. Now, getting into it, let's bring up a market, OTVI.MEM. Bring up Memphis here. When we're bringing up Memphis here, we can see what has been going on in the Memphis market. We can scroll back here and see, of course, this dip in September is our Labor Day holiday. The market's picked back up. But looking like starting here in the beginning of October, you see where the volumes in Memphis here have started a downward trend. They've gone from looks like somewhere around 174 index points starting up here at the last peak. And they've dropped down now to 142. So almost a 20% reduction in volumes here. So this lets us know the Memphis market has been declining over the past month. And of course, we saw what's going on in the national volume. So they have also declined, but they declined over the last 2 or 3 days. We can also bring up and compare. I want to tap in compare, and I'm going to put ITVI, which is the inbound volumes. Now, when we're comparing to indices, it's okay to use the absolute value, but sometimes I like using the dual value when you're comparing two indices that are not the same. Let's say you're looking at tender rejection rates, which are measured in a percentage, versus the volume, which is an index point. You would need to use the dual view, but I like the dual view because it brings them closer together and you can see the trends. So I'm going to compare ITVI.MEM on the dual axis here. And when you look at it, of course, when you're looking at a chart on the right-hand side here, this is the index of the main indice that you're measuring. So outbound tender volumes are over here on the right-hand side. And for Memphis today, they are 142. Now I'm comparing it, the green line here, these are inbound tender volumes. This gives us a dual y-axis. And on your left-hand side, this is the axis that measures what we're comparing to. So Memphis is 86.11. And you can see here, even though it's higher, kind of look over here, we see that there is more in outbound, 142, than inbound still in the Memphis market. You can see where inbound was kind of maybe rose gently from mid-October through the beginning of November, but then dropped down along with our outbound volumes dropping down. So this could have a real effect on capacity. I'm going to check out one more and show you a tree map for volumes, and then we'll jump into our Headhaul Index, which will help us measure capacity. I'm going to add another page here, and I'm going to put SONAR tree map, volumes, add. It'll come up blank. I'm going to click the plus sign and go down to tree map here. I have to name this again. I'm just going to put let's put SONAR correctly. SONAR tree map. Now click on manage symbols as we build this tree map about. We're going to build a tree map on volumes. In the tree map section, we have this one category. It's the 5 popular trucking indices. I want to open that up because that's where my volume and my tender rejection rates are used. So here we're going to click on outbound tender volumes. I'm going to click the plus sign. And I'm going to put a check here by X markets. I want to look at all 135 markets. I'm going to select this item. Scroll down. You see where all the OTVI and all the markets populate here on the right. I'm going to click done. You'll see outbound tender volume index for all the markets. I'm going to scroll down and click save. You hit this big arrow and build this thing a little bit bigger. So this is a tree map. Tree maps, I really love looking at tree maps as well because they start in the upper left-hand corner. And these are the largest markets. The tree map works its way down and to the right. You can see some dominant lines through the map. We see where Atlanta is the largest market and Ontario is the second largest. It works its way down to Houston here at 236, and it jumps back up here in the middle here to Dallas, and it works its way down. And as the squares get smaller, it's because the markets are getting smaller. And then over here in the very bottom right, you can barely see them, but these are the smallest markets in the U.S. So if you immediately want to know, hey, what are the largest markets in the U.S., bring up a tree map. Here are the top 10 right here. Now, this grayish looking color right here, we measure these outbound tender volumes every day. So since the last time this was measured, the Atlanta, Georgia market has had a 0% increase or decrease. So that's why it is a gray color. That means if there's 0 or little increase or little decrease, it'll stay the neutral color. This number down here at the very bottom, this is the actual index for today. So 382.52, that's Atlanta, and it is the largest market. The next largest market is Ontario, Canada. Ontario, California. it has declined negative 5.5% since yesterday, and it has a current value of 3.80. So yesterday, Ontario was the largest market. It declined 5% and is now the second largest market. And you can see the ones that are in red have declined and the ones that are in green have increased. Joliet, Illinois has increased 1.2% since yesterday. It has a index value of 262.64, and that is the index points for Joliet, Illinois. And it looks like it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about the sixth largest market in the U.S. Joliet's a market that has a lot of warehousing from the freight that comes in to the Chicago market. So this is a tree map. You can bring tree maps up for outbound tender volumes, outbound tender rejections. You can break that down into dry van tender volumes or reefer tender volumes, or dry van tender rejection rates or reefer tender rejection rates. It's a good tool to see kind of visually what's increasing, what's decreasing, and what the percentages are. What are the biggest markets? What are the smallest markets? Now let's get back and go to a chart. I'm going to go next to our Headhaul Index. And I want to continue looking at this chart that we had here in Memphis. We look at the outbound. We see the outbound tender volume is 142, and we see our inbound volumes of 186. The difference between the outbound tender volumes and the inbound tender volumes, we call that our Headhaul Index. And our ticker for that is haul dot, and I'm going to put MEM for Memphis. So I'm just going to bring this up on a chart because I like seeing the graph here of what is going on, and I love using this to measure capacity. Are they gaining trucks in the market, or are they losing trucks in the market? And that's where we go ahead and let's compare this to OVTI.MEM and ITVI.MEM. There it is. So here on the right-hand side, we see 56.09. That is the difference between 142 and 86.11. So outbound minus the inbound. It's the spread between here. And it lets us know, since it's a positive number, it lets us know that there are more trucks leaving the market than entering the market. So that's very good to understand when we're trying to look and see what's going on with capacity. Now, here looking at my little ticker, I can see that here back in the middle of October on the 21st, it was 78.09. So we have been losing, or our capacity Headhaul Index has actually been declining, which means the difference between inbound and outbound freight has been getting closer. So when we look at it, we can see here that on the red line here, our outbound freight has been slightly declining, where the inbound freight held pretty steady here up to the first week of November. But both of them declined slightly. So it looks like the inbound declined a little bit more than the outbound. So you saw it actually picking up for the Headhaul Index. So this lets you understand what's going on. I always bring up and look at the Headhaul Index, and I look at it with the outbound and inbound tender volumes to understand what is making this change happen with the Headhaul Index. Now, I always bring up that's a tree map. I want to bring up a regular map, and let's view the Headhaul Index on a US map, because this map is going to look a little bit different than when you look at the other either volume maps or tender reject maps. It's going to have a little bit more color to it. I can click on this right here, and I'm going to type Headhaul. When I type in Headhaul, you see it says Headhaul Index right here. I'm going to click on Headhaul Index. When I bring this up, you will see we have both blue and red. The red indicates markets that are a backhaul. It's a negative headhaul score. So we call those backhaul markets. Most people are familiar with Phoenix. It's always a really, really bright red for 11 months out of the year. And of course, right here above Phoenix are the Ontario and LAX markets. Those markets show a lot more outbound volumes than inbound volumes. So here it shows a positive 55 for Ontario. What's important to see on this map is when you're researching a market, you always want to look at the markets that you're looking at and see what's going on. So here, if we're looking at Ontario, we see that it's blue with 55, but also look at the surrounding markets. Here up in Northern California, we got San Francisco at just a +4, which means it's pretty well balanced. But here we have the Stockton mark, which is -28. Down here below, we have the Phoenix mark, which is -83. So we do not measure deadhead when we're looking at the Headhaul Index, but it's always good to go and look at the markets around to understand if you're looking at a Southern California market, you're probably going to have, if you have markets around it that are either neutral or red, you're probably going to have trucks that are going deadheading from that market into the Ontario or LAX market, because that's where the freight is. When you have an abundance of freight in those markets, you'll attract trucks. And of course, with the markets that are red being backhaul markets, there are too many trucks. There's a lot more trucks than there are loads. Those trucks will leave those markets. Look over here at the tip of Florida, bright red. And when we look around, you see the Savannah market there. It's a bright blue. So you're going to have a lot of trucks that are coming up from Florida that can't find freight. And they're going to move over to the Southern Georgia markets, or all the way up into Atlanta possibly, because there's a lot more freight in those markets. So great map to understand. Memphis here is a bright blue, has a Headhaul Index of 56, but the surrounding markets are all white. So they have very low here. Jackson, Mississippi is evenly balanced. You might have some trucks moving over to the Memphis market. Little Rock, Arkansas is a 1, so it's also relatively, it's just balanced. I don't get excited on the Headhaul score until it kind of breaks the +25 or -25. Anything in between the -25 and +25 is pretty much a balanced or backhaul market. Now, moving on, we had volumes that kind of measure where the freight is. We have the Headhaul Index that helps us move through capacity. And now I have what I call our Outbound Tender Rejection Index. Now, to me, this is the index that I'll spend the most time on today. This is the most important index to me, speaking from the perspective of a broker. And the reason that this is the most important is because it correlates very closely with spot market rates. I'm going to show it to you here at first on a map. So type in rejection, local inbound rejections. I'm looking for, let's type in outbound. Scroll down here, outbound container. A lot of real data we have in here that helps out outbound tender market share. Outbound tender rejection rate index. So this starts off with the markets that have a low tender rejection rate of 0 pretty much to 8%. Those are all in white. And as tender rejection rates start to climb, we have a light shade of blue. So that's 8% to 15%. And as they get darker, they start to shade in a darker shade of blue. Now, this is OTRI, which is all trailer types. That's dry van, reefer, and flatbed, all in one average here for the markets. Now, the way I gauge this is about 0 to 3%. That lets me know that spot market rates are below contracted rates when I'm looking at tender rejection rates. 3% to about 7%. That's letting me know that spot market rates are just below, right up, or possibly just above our contracted rates. When we get above 7%, that lets us know that spot market rates are climbing above contracted rates. Now, the big question is how does this relate to spot market rates? And so we'll kind of hop on over here and we'll look at a chart first. When I'm explaining outbound tender rejection rates, it's described as the willingness of a carrier to run a load out of a certain market. And we measure the willingness by using the tender rejection rate. So if 95% of the loads are being accepted, which is a very high percentage, that means 5% of the loads are being rejected. So I'm going to bring up our average DAT rate per mile that you'll see Um, the average long haul rate on that, and this is what is basically our spot market rate. And I'm going to go back here, and you can see where here in June it picked up, and it's currently $1.41.6, and that is for the date is for 10/30. So right there at the end of October, it picked up to a dollar, almost $1.42. Now I'm going to compare that with OTRI.USA, and this is our outbound tender rejection index for the U.S. as well. So I'm going to compare the average DAT rate, average rate they show, versus our tender rejection rate. And I'm going to back this out to about a year, maybe a little bit further here, scroll back. And I want you to look at the relationship. Let me turn this little blue box off. The relationship, as you see the blue line, this is our DAT rates. As DAT rates rose, you see on the purple line here that our outbound tender rejection rates also rose. As the DAT rates decreased, you see on the purple line that our outbound tender rejection rates also decreased. There's a very close correlation. Now you'll see some gaps, but understand we're comparing $1.41, which is a US dollar value, to a percentage. So over here on the left, you'll see 5.57% is the current rate for DAT for our tender rejection rates right now. So what's important to see is when your spot market rates are starting to increase, so are our tender rejection rates. And when the spot markets decrease, our tender rejection rates also decrease. So they correlate very closely with what's going on in the spot market relative to our contracted rates. I want to zoom in here and look very closely at the last 7 to 10 days. As you see, our DAT rate stops on 10/30, and our tender rejection rate continues on. This is very important. When a rating tool gives you a rate per mile, it is actually giving you the average rate of the data they collected. So if I book a load today, it may pick up tomorrow. It may take a day or two for it to deliver, and then the driver may take an extra day before they send it in to the company. And then the data company goes in and collects the data from the company. This can take a little while, and they also have to get a proper sample size. So when you're using a rating tool, a lot of them are 7 to 10 days behind. And that's what's happened here. We see this on that. Here, the rate per mile that we're getting, $1.41, is actually on the 30th of October. And you can see here the national tender rejection rate has actually increased. So in this case, if you were getting a rate from here, from your DAT rating tool, you might be actually underbidding the freight. This could also be declining. In the last 7 to 10 days, you could have markets where the tender rejection rates have fallen, meaning that your spot market rate has fallen. And therefore, if you use the rate, you will actually be overbidding the freight. So if you're overbidding the freight, you're not going to win the freight. So I like using this tool to maximize my revenue and also increase my load count. And right here's where you can really get the value out, is in the last 7 to 10 days and the trends that are going in on a market. So today I looked at St. Louis. Let's look at OTRI.STL. And in the St. Louis market here, let's back up to beginning of October. We see where it kind of trended down the last few weeks of September here and ran pretty low through October. But here on October 21st, we see where the rates in St. Louis, the tender rejection rates, started to increase. Now this OTRI, this is all trailer type. So this is the average of dry van and reefers. So what I'm looking at here is it's climbed all the way up to 8.97%. So on average, this is letting me know that tender rejection rates have climbed up above contracted rates in the St. Louis market. So this is kind of exciting, especially from the perspective of a broker. Now, from the perspective of a shipper, you'll have the opposite. Shippers want rates to stay down. So tender rejection rates, they want to stay low. So they're going to be looking to see what's going on and knowing that when they see low tender rejection rates, that the market rates in their market are going to be low. And if a shipper sees tender rejection rates starting to climb, then they should expect higher carrier rates. So in that case, they'll maybe need to adjust their tender lead times or contact their contracted freight carriers to assure that they get capacity. What's exciting about this is we've now gotten to where we can break these tender rejection rates down by dry van and reefer. So the dry van is VOTRI.STL. And the reefer is ROTRI.STL. Now, looking at this map again on the 8.97%. This is my main indice, which is OTRI, which is the outbound tender rejection rate of all trailer types. And on the left here, I've got the orange line here is reefer. It is 18.82%. And the green line down here is the dry van, which is 8.73%. So this lets us break it down, and it's a little bit different of a story. Dry vans represent about 75 to 85% of the freight in the market. So when you're looking at the OTRI up here at the very top, most of this is actually dry van. But here reefer is 18.82%. So almost 20% of the freight in this market are being rejected. What's the number one reason that carriers reject freight in the market? Is because they're getting a better rate for their trucks. They might reject their contracted freight and go to the spot market and pick up freight that has better paying freight. So this lets us know right here that rejection rates at 18%. I say we get excited at 10%. When they break 7%, we know it's above contracted. Get excited at 10%. At 18% tender rejection rate, I'm going to be increasing my rates well above my contracted rates. Now, if we zoom in here and we look on the 30th, tender rejection rates in St. Louis were much, much lower. So right here on the 30th is where that's going to be giving you their average rate for a reefer. And since then, it looks like we've gone from around the 7-8% rejection rate all the way up to 18%. So in this case, if you're just using a rating tool, you might be underbidding this freight. And this might be enough of an underbid that you actually lose money on your freight out of the St. Louis market. So you see here where your rate per mile is, and then you see it increase almost 10% to the 18.82% tender rejection rate. You need to increase your bids well over what the market rate you're being told by using a rating tool. On the dry van side, here it went from about 7.5% to about 8.73%. So there was a slight increase, but not a extremely large increase like we saw in the reefers. So this is where we get a lot of value is what has happened in the last 7 or 8 days, 7 to 10 days in your market trends on what's going on. And that lets you know if you need to increase or decrease your rates based on what you're bidding. We can also look at inbound, ITRI.ATL. And this kind of just shows us how much a carrier is resistant to running into a market. And a lot of times when these markets get really tough, you'll see tender rejection rates pick up. And here in Atlanta, we saw, as Atlanta struggled all year long, we saw tender rejection rates start to pick up around 7% as people were resisting the Atlanta market. But here, as we saw market volumes on a national level drop here in the last few days, that puts a lot of extra capacity in the market. So now you've seen tender rejection rates drop for the Atlanta market because carriers are more willing to run into that market right now because they need the freight. So this could have an effect if here rates are dropping for inbound going into Atlanta because overall your market's being saturated with capacity, and that's going to push tender rejection or that's going to put the price down running into most all markets right now. So you can view this also on you can view tender rejection rates also on tree maps if you would like, but I really love using the charts. Now, as we move on through this, we showed where we can look at outbound tender rejection rates as a whole. We showed where we can break it down by reefer or dry van. Another good way to break these down is by lane. I'm going to type in SOTRI dots. Let's use Atlanta as well, ATL. MOTRI.ATL. I'll explain these here in just a second. TOTRI.ATL and LOTRI.ATL. TL. I'm going to set my display to absolute because these are all the same indices measurements, rejection rates, which are measured in a percentage. So it's going to give me all of my values over here on the right side of the screen. I'll press F11 to increase the size of my screen here. Now, we're looking at the lane lengths. I have the short haul as my main indice. Short haul is loads that deliver 100 to 250 miles from the Atlanta markets. My mid haul are loads that deliver 251 miles to 450 miles from the Atlanta market. I have my tweener haul, and this one's kind of important. We'll get to it in just a second, talk about it a little bit more. It's loads that deliver 451 miles to 800 miles from the Atlanta market. And then we have our long haul loads. These are loads that deliver 800 miles plus. As we look at this, we've broken our tender rejection rates down. Now, this is all trailer types, down by lane length. And you can see here the load length is the tweener haul that has been rejected the most at 4.71%. So still over 95% of these loads are being accepted. The mid-haul loads, 251 to 450, about 97% of these loads are being accepted at contracted rates. Again, a little bit over 98 or a little bit less than 98% on the long haul. And on the short haul, about 96% of the loads are being accepted. This lets you know which lane types are being either rejected more or accepted more. So here we see what's going on in the last 7 to 10 days. That a lot of these lines for the Atlanta market have stayed relatively flat. Here, the short haul are trending downward. So spot market rates for short haul loads of the Atlanta market are being pushed down. Here on the mid haul, they've pushed up just a little bit so far. But here, relatively all the rates between 3 to almost 5%. These lanes are staying within contracted rates between the 3 to 7%. But it lets you know when you see one picking up, if you see one lane particularly picking up a lot higher, up to 8 or 9%, that could let you know that maybe if the freight that you're bidding is the short haul lane, that you might need to increase your bid for that lane distance. The tweener haul, the reason I mentioned it being a little bit different is that's the load that's the 451 miles to 800 miles. That's that lane that you pick a load up. It takes you about a day and a half to run it because of our new ELDs. And you probably may not be able to get a delivery point for about 2 days. So there's some maybe some sitting time that you do not want to due to utilization of the truck. You don't want to have your truck sitting. So this is a lane that's very underutilizes a lot of your trucks or tractors. So if they can be declined, a lot of your freight companies will decline those loads, and they'd rather get them either a short haul, a mid haul, or go for the very long haul. So this is a good indicator of what is going on in a market. When there's a lot of options for drivers to have, you'll actually see the tweener haul be the first one to jump up on tender rejection rates. Carriers will decline that load and pick something else. If the market gets tight like the Atlanta market here, you'll see this number drop. I like seeing a tweener rejection rate 11, 12, 13% and higher. And that lets me know that there's optionalities for carriers. And then you might have a low mid-haul or low long-haul tweener rejection rate. But as you see it drop down to 4.71%, this tells us right here, running fairly low here, that there's not a lot of options for carriers in the Atlanta market. So they're having to accept all the freight that they're provided. So moving on here, we've looked at volumes. We've looked at the Headhaul Index. Let's go to a quick map that I love to use also that can really kind of help you figure out what's going on in these markets, because a lot of people struggle with where to start when they first log into SONAR. Now that we kind of know what's going on with volumes and going on with the Headhaul Index and know what's going on with outbound tender rejection rates, I'm going to start a new page here, and I'm going to put VOL volatile markets and add that page. VOL being in Tennessee, that does not mean the Tennessee Vols. Open up the blue plus sign here, go down to most volatile markets. I'm going to click on this. Here you have all the markets are already listed. If you'd like to, you could take off the X marks and just pick a few markets if you would like. I like looking at every market, and click save here. And it'll bring you up kind of like a market table here. But you can sort this market table. It has our airport code already listed out here, ATL for Atlanta, ONT for Ontario. It has a market percentage, the U.S. market share, outbound tender yeah. This is our outbound tender volumes here. And then we have our outbound tender rejection rates, our head haul volatility, which is our head haul score, and then tender lead times. So you can pick these and arrow up. If you hit arrow up twice, you'll see here the very top market moves to Norfolk, Virginia. Now, what we've done on this is we've listed out all of the volumes, all of the outbound tender rejection rate, which is all trailer types, tender lead times, and we put it all here in one market table. If we use a red and green coloring to the markets to quickly identify the markets that have shifted. Now, if it goes up or down, we just don't stick a red or green block to it. We actually take a average of 1 year. And then during a 1 week period, we use one standard deviation. If a market increases one standard deviation over the average in a 1 week period, we increase that to a moderate increase, which is a light shaded green. If it starts getting up to around 2 standard deviations on the average change, we give it a dark green and give it a strong increase. So here for the Norfolk, Virginia, we have a strong increase. It's increased 16.69% on the head haul volatility, so the Headhaul Index. And then, of course, this number down here is the actual. So even though it's increased almost 70%, the Headhaul Index is still negative 13.71. Now, this just lets you know what markets to go in and look at. You still might want to go in and look at the dry van and reefer tender rejection rates, because this could be one or the other driving this increase and causing capacity to tighten up when you may not see it quite here. But overall, the outbound tender rejection rate in Norfolk is only 2.81%. So it's still relatively low, but we see the big increase in the head haul volatility. Down here, we see some that are in red. These have decreases, a moderate decrease, and then there's a strong decrease. So these have decreased about 1 standard deviation of the average. And the market volatility in the Missoula, Montana market has dropped 1.83% down to negative 4.56. So this gives you a real quick reference of markets that you might want to jump in and investigate. Looking at OTRI, which is one of my favorites here, Saginaw, Michigan. It has that at 34% increase in the last week. So tender rejection rates are averaging 36.29% in the Saginaw, Michigan market. That's a market, if I'm a broker, that I want to get into. It looks like capacity could be tight. I see tender lead times over here. I've increased to 3.57 days, which lets me know that shippers are seeing an increase in capacity or tightening in capacity. So tender rejection rates are going up. Outbound tender rejection rates are also increasing. Market rates in this market are going up. There's a lot of volatility. I'm going to bid high rates in the Saginaw, Michigan market and then try to cover these loads and make a better margin. You can click here on the actual green box and it'll show you a graph of what is going on. Now the Saginaw, Michigan market is up there around Detroit. So we know with the effects of what's been going on with the strike, getting everything put back together, we saw where tender rejection rates were fairly low. And as this market started to pick up, because even though it's the actual Detroit market, the Detroit market has a profound effect on all the surrounding markets that are within about 400 miles of Detroit. So Saginaw's picked up. A lot of the markets in Indiana and Ohio have also picked up because those volumes have returned. So back over here to my kill this map. Market volatility map. Again, this is you can scroll down and see, this is a good starting place to investigate what's the big major changes are in different markets. And as you can just scroll down, you can always see and compare side by side Twin Falls, Idaho. Their volumes have picked up 30% to 60.06. And here, since their volumes have picked up, we show an increase also in the Headhaul Index of 13.68%, up to 29.43. So here we have volumes picking up. We have the Headhaul Index picking up. This could be an indicator that capacity is getting tight. I want to pull this market up in my charts and see what the trends are in the last 7 to 10 days. Let's go ahead and jump over back to my charts here, and let's go through tender lead times. I don't want a map. I want a chart. Now, tender lead times measure pretty much the reaction of a shipper in a market. Let's use Memphis, MEM. The ticker is TLT.MEM. So we've all had, as a broker, we've all had the loads that are, we know are going to be tough to cover. So you're talking to your people and say, hey, look, you have a load picking up, let's say out of Boston, Massachusetts, picking up on Thursday. That's a tough market. I need you to, or let's say PA to Boston, which is going to bring a high rate. You talk to people and say, hey, look, don't wait till Thursday to book that load. You're going to pay an expensive rate. Book that load here on Monday or Tuesday, and you'll get a better rate from your carrier. What are they doing? They're actually extending their tender lead times. The tender lead time is the time between booking the load and it actually picking up. So if I book it on Tuesday and it's picking up on Thursday, we have about a 2-day tender lead time. And our average tender lead time, let's compare this, TLT.USA. Now I'm using TLT, which I might get my hands slapped. We've actually broken tender lead times down into inbound and outbound. So actually I should be using OTLT.MEM. This is outbound tender rejection rates for Memphis, and OTLT.USA, because we can also look at inbound tender rejection rates now, a new indice that we've come out with in the past few weeks. So looking at the blue line, Memphis is 2.69 days on the average. I always compare this to the national average to see what's been going on. The national average is up to 2.58. So Memphis is fairly close, and it's been kind of going down, retracting here in the past week. So since we broke the beginning of November, we've seen tender volumes go down. Now we're seeing our tender lead times also go down. So this shows us here in the Memphis market that shippers are getting a little bit of relief and they're not having to book their trucks so soon. Whenever I see tender lead times start to increase in a market, that lets me know that maybe there's some issues with capacity or that shippers are seeing rates increase. So let's look at OTLT.STL. We looked kind of St. Louis earlier today. Here in the St. Louis market, I saw at the end of October, tender lead times start to pick up. So this is a sign that there could be some capacity issues that are being seen by shippers. It's increased from 2.2 all the way up to 2.70 and kind of flattened out there. Now that kind of gives me more information to say, hey, look, I might want to look deeper into the St. Louis market. So I might compare this to ROTRI.STL. And since I'm using a measurement in days versus a percentage, I'm going to stick it on dual axis here. And then I can really compare and see, look, as tender lead times were expanding, reefer tender rejection rates were also picking up in the Memphis market. Here are two signs that are letting me know there's upward pressure on carrier rates. So bidding freight here and seeing this happening in the last 7 to 10 days, those are signs to tell me increase my bids to help me maximize my revenues. And they could very well prevent losses in these markets, because if you're not positive what's going on and that there's an upward shift in the market, it could cause you to bid freight and lose money. I've got time of 4:23, so we got just a few minutes to maybe cover one more quick indice. Let's look at wait times. Our ticker is WAIT, wait, dots, and let's use ATL. What we're measuring is the average times that trucks sit in a market, possibly loading at the dock. So we're trying to help measure how long trucks are sitting at shippers or receivers in a market. And this is a index that's measured by the month. So we have through the end of September right now. We should be getting our data soon here for what's happened from October. But what we can see here is the truck is on average have sat either 169 minutes at a shipper or receiver in the Atlanta market. Now, we all know that the average is about 2 hours before carriers start charging detention. So this can kind of let you know which markets have done what. In the Atlanta market, since looks like June, we've seen it grow from 140 minutes and slowly climbed up to 169 minutes. So the average wait time for drivers in this market is actually expanding and getting longer, which shame on Atlanta. They're holding their drivers too long. And you can check on different markets or compare it to the national. Let's look at St. Louis here. St. Louis here was trending down from about 130 minutes, which is just over 2 hours. They dropped down to about around the 2 hour mark, but they're still at 125 minutes. So these markets are kind of can help predict, how long you might be waiting in these markets, which could lead you to adding some extra funds to this bid if you know that either the pickup or delivery location might have an extended amount of time. Here in the Boston market, again, these are all running about 2 hours. You can compare these, wait.usa. The average wait time in the U.S. is 150 minutes. So we've kind of noticed with wait times when markets are slow, wait times actually extend. And when the market starts to pick up, dock workers increase their capacity. They hire more people, and they get the trucks loaded a whole lot faster. So during the peak times like December here, you might see the wait times start to drop. So a quick review, we've looked at outbound tender volumes. We can look at them at a U.S. map. We can look at them on a chart. I love my charts because you can see the changes, the trends that are happening. Are volumes increasing or volumes decreasing? We looked at the Headhaul Index. Headhaul kind of measures up what kind of capacity that we're having. Our market's having capacity issues that might help push the rate up. We can look at them on a U.S. map, see which ones are red. Understand when you're looking at the Headhaul Index map, know the markets that are surrounding the market that you're investigating. Are they red markets or blue markets? Show them up on a chart, see if they're trending up or trending down. My favorite, outbound tender rejection rates. Break them down by reefer and drive-in. See which direction those are trending when you're using it with a rating tool. And understand, you need to increase your rate or decrease your rate to help you win a lot more freight. Outbound tender rejection rates correlate very closely with what is going on in the spot market. Spot market, a lot of things are based on what's going off on the spot market. Tender lead times, that's the reaction that we're getting from the shippers. Are tender lead times expanding? Are shippers having issues with capacity? Those are signs that could also show that spot market rates are increasing or decreasing in a market. Thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Zach talking about some TCA data. How does your company match up to the big guys when we're looking at some of the benchmarking indexes? Join us tomorrow. I believe we're going to be at 11:30 or 11 o'clock. 11:30, I believe. That'll be tomorrow. Sign up for that. And I appreciate all y'all listening today.